This is beer. At least this is the visual most of us have when we think of or hear the word beer. A cold, refreshing beverage that's golden in color and with light effervescence. This is a pale lager, the world's most popular beer style. Of the top 10 selling beer brands in the world, all of them are pale lagers. This style is brewed in every continent on Earth, but it's only been around for less than 200 years. While pale lagers are widely popular among the masses, the reputation among beer connoisseurs is, not great. In fact, the first beer you tried was probably a pale lager and was likely very bland or barely drinkable. However, not all lagers fit this stereotype. Pilsner, the beer that nearly all pale lagers trace their origin to, has subtle barley and hop flavors and when made well, can hold its own in any craft beer bar. This is BevGeek, and today we're going to take a closer look at Pilsner. We begin our story in a Central European country that takes its beer seriously. This country is the highest consumer of beer per capita in the world and has a long, rich brewing tradition. This country, of course, is Czechia. Don't worry, Germany, we'll come back to you later in the video. The borders of modern-day Czechia include Bohemia, a region that spent much of its history as a vassal state under the rule of a variety of German empires, most notably the Holy Roman Empire. In Bohemia lies a town called Pilsen, or Pilsen as it's known in German. As it was in much of Europe, brewing beer was an important way to use and consume grain for the Bohemians. At Pilsen's founding in 1295, Bohemian King Wenceslas II granted the town's citizens the right to brew and sell beer from their homes. Brewing privileges would be handed down in each family, and over time, these brewers would form guilds to share their knowledge and techniques. Community malt houses would later form, so the brewers could benefit from the economies of scale. A system of tunnels beneath the city, dating back to the 13th century, gave these brewers the perfect climate-controlled space to store their beer. Brewing in Pilsen would flourish in the ensuing centuries, but would also hit setbacks as Bohemia was ravaged by numerous wars. Most notably, the 30 Years' War, a conflict between Catholic and Protestant factions throughout Central Europe in the 1600s, was started in nearby Prague and devastated much of Bohemia. Brewing quality in Pilsen continued to ebb and flow, but was in major decline by the beginning of the 19th century. Things got so bad that in 1838, the city's brewers, dissatisfied with their beer, dumped 36 barrels of it right in front of City Hall. Something had to change. After the subpar suds were dumped, the brewers of Pilsen decided to band together and build a new brewery just outside of town. This brewery would be state-of-the-art for its day, taking advantage of new brewing technologies that were emerging during the Industrial Revolution. To run this brewery, they went to neighboring Bavaria, a region renowned for its high-quality beer, and hired a brewer named Joseph Groll. It was around this time that brewers were gaining a wider understanding of the science behind brewing and fermentation, particularly the role that yeast plays in the process, as well as the different strains of yeast involved. Bavaria has long been home to lager-style beers, brewed using a strain of bottom-fermenting yeast that works at colder temperatures, resulting in a smoother beer. The use of lager yeast was gaining popularity outside of Bavaria, and around this time, there was a legend about a monk smuggling a prized strain of lager yeast from Bavaria. Technological advances were also being made in malt roasting. Earlier beers were dark, as controlling the roast level in malted barley was difficult to do in the primitive kilns of the day. By the 19th century, kilning technology started to see massive improvements, and lighter roasted malts, pioneered earlier in Britain, found their way to Central Europe. Using these light roasted malts resulted in a lighter colored beer with more of the inherent flavor of the barley present. This was a significant change from the darker, sweeter beers that drinkers were familiar with. The lighter malts also allowed for more flavor from hops, long used as a spice and a preservative, to shine through in the beer. These technological advances coalesced at the new brewery in Pilsen. Joseph would brew a beer using pale malts and lager yeast. Pilsen soft water would extract a good amount of solubles from the pale malt, which paired well with the Saaz hops grown in the area. The cool climate of Bohemia allowed for fermenting at the cooler temperatures needed for the lager yeast. The town system of medieval tunnels was well suited for lagering the beer, a process of storage at low temperature resulting in a smoother flavor. Unfortunately, the new brewery was built outside of town, so an extensive system of tunnels was built underneath the new brewery with sufficient space to lager massive amounts of beer. The result was a golden, smooth beer that brought out the best attributes of both the pale malt and the noble hops. Perfectly balanced, as all things should be. This beer would eventually be named Pilsner Urquell, German for Original Spring of Pilsen, and it was a hit. Following this success, other breweries would be established in Pilsen brewing similar beers, for example, Gambrinus. Word of these new Pilsner-style lagers would spread throughout Bohemia, in cities like Prague and České Budějovice, known as Budweiser in German, would start brewing this style themselves. It wouldn't be long before Pilsner beer would spread outside Bohemia. Pilsner's next stop would be Germany. See, we didn't forget about you. Brewers throughout the recently formed German Empire would begin experimenting with their own takes on the Pilsner style. In and around Munich, a less hopped pale lager called the Helles would take hold, Helles being the German word for bright. Farther north, brewers would keep the beer relatively hoppy, swapping out the Saaz hops for the local Haltertau variety. However, the harder water in northern Germany led to a lighter-bodied beer with less malt extraction. This, in turn, made the hops more pronounced in the brew. This variation on the Bohemian beer became known as the German Pils, a shortened version of its namesake. The differences between these two variants can still be seen today. If you sample Pilsner Urquell next to Bitburger, a very typical German Pils, you will notice that the balance between the malt and hops in the Czech beer gives way to a lighter body and hoppier flavor in its German counterpart. Both beers are available worldwide, so you should be able to find these at your local beer store so you can taste the difference yourself. Industrial advances continued to affect the rise in Pilsner's popularity. A period of relative peace on the continent following the Franco-Prussian War led to a growing railroad network in Europe, increasing the availability of cold chain transportation. This allowed for Pilsner to be shipped throughout the continent. Soon, local brewers were brewing their own pale lagers. These would be common in beer havens such as the Netherlands and Belgium, and would also find popularity in countries better known for wine such as Italy, France, and Spain. However, these lagers would never take hold across the English Channel, where pale ales already had a stronghold on the market. It would be the Germans that would eventually bring Pilsner-style beers to America. The United States saw a high influx of immigration from Germany in the late 19th century, particularly in the Midwest. Many of these immigrants were brewers and brought recipes with them for brewing light-bodied Pils beers. However, there was a problem. The 6-row barley that was grown in North America was much higher in protein and enzymes than the 2-row barley that was more common in Europe. This made the beer cloudy, unlike the clean, clear brews from the old country. The American brewers were able to clean up their beers by adding unmalted grains called adjuncts to their brew. Maize, or corn, was the most common adjunct and is still used for this purpose today. Later, some brewers, most notably St. Louis's Anheuser-Busch, would start using rice as an adjunct grain. These adjuncts made for a lighter-bodied beer, but these new brews lacked a lot of the nuanced flavors found in their all-malt European cousins. However, these light, refreshing beers were well suited for America's warmer climate, and with ice-cooled train cars making nationwide distribution possible, the American Pale Lager grew to become the most prominent beer style in the country. From here, pale lagers would branch out into new markets around the world. European immigrants to Latin America brought the style there, and as trade with East Asia became more commonplace, the style would expand there as well. With the advances in food manufacturing that followed the end of World War II, these beers could be produced on a massive scale, and increased globalization would bring these beers to every corner of the globe. From east to west, from Australia to Zambia, pale lagers had become the world's most predominant beer style. As breweries got larger and larger, the focus shifted from quality to quantity, and these lagers started getting their bland reputation. By the 1980s and 90s, microbreweries would introduce consumers to darker and hoppier beers in opposition to the cookie-cutter, mass-produced beers of the day. It seemed that Pilsner was destined to become an afterthought. But now, it's having a bit of a renaissance. More and more craft brewers are introducing Pilsners into their lineup. Just as hop-heavy IPAs served as a contrast to microbeers in previous decades, the lighter body, subtle flavor, and lower alcohol in Pilsners serve as a counterbalance to the increasingly heavy, hazy, hoppy, boozy offerings common in craft beer today. Brewers would rediscover the quality Pilsners of Czechia and Germany and learn how to make their own tasty golden beers. They would also find making these beers more challenging, as the lagering process is more time-intensive and requires more attention to the details of the brewing process. This forces brewers to use better ingredients. Poor ingredients or mistakes in brewing technique cannot be hidden as easily in Pilsners as they can with IPAs and darker beers, and many brewers like the challenge of brewing first-rate lighter beers. Pilsner might just be the world's most important beer style. The Industrial Revolution made brewing this lighter beer possible, and transportation innovations brought it around the world. While its brethren can be bland and uninspiring, when well done, it can be an excellent beer worth revering. Through it all, Pilsner came to signify what we know as beer. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video useful, click the like button. If you want to see more videos like this, consider subscribing. This is a brand new channel, and any support you give helps. What do you think of old school European Pilsners? Have you had any newer craft Pilsners that you liked? What is your favorite beverage? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks again, and I hope to see you next time.